All right, so we're going to get started. Thanks for joining in. We got a nice group of people calling in already, and we're just looking forward to sharing some insights, expertise, and just other items that we've been talking to school districts about over the last month or so, kind of all across the Midwest. So as a brief introduction of the group that's talking today and just sharing some background, Kevin Bills, architect with ISG and education specialist. Kevin Hildebrandt, turning it over to you.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hildebrandt, facility management and planning for ISG. Been with ISG a couple of years. Before that, I 40 years in the public education, most of it as a facility director for a couple different public schools here in Minnesota. Tim?
Hi, yep, Tim Verhan, a principal and civil engineer with ISG. I've got about 13 years practicing.
And Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda Prosser. I am a landscape architect with ISG, and I also help lead our sports and rec group, and I've been practicing for just over 15 years.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm Mike Nelson. I'm electrical practice group leader. I've been with ISG just a little over 15 years and have done many K-12 school projects.
As I mentioned in the introduction, we work with just a wide variety of school districts and education clients across the Midwest. And so over the last few weeks and maybe a month and a half or so, we've just seen such a wide range of responses to this time from school districts and universities as well. And so we thought it'd be great to put together a webinar so we can share, what are we seeing that's happening in across different school districts, and also, share some best practices in this unique time. So as we get into the discussion, we put together just a few goals. One is to explore less common summer maintenance items to consider. With some extra time this year, what are some of those next step things to maybe consider, or maybe typically just don't get the attention that they deserve? Ways to accelerate shovel-ready type projects. Learn about competitive bidding environment that's going on due to lower construction activity and increased summer work time frame. And before I forget, if you do have questions, you can submit them on Skype. So you can submit questions, and then we will take a look at those and review them at the end and go through any question and answers that there might be. So to start off with, Tim, I'll turn it over to you, talking about site and site maintenance.
Yep. Hello, and thanks for joining us today. So some of you are wondering what you can do during this extended shutdown to keep your maintenance staff busy. So the next few slides, I'll go through a list of some good practice and proactive routine maintenance items that you can do with your internal staff. And then a little later in the presentation, we'll take a deeper dive into some more advanced practices that might require some external assistance. So kind of regardless of what type of parking lot you maintain right now, it's a good time to fill potholes. Potholes and gravel lots should be filled with a well-graded aggregate that will compact and bond. For potholes in asphalt or concrete, the best approach is to clean those out with a concrete saw, get some square edges, and then patch those. A more long-term solution for concrete pavement is to drill in some dowel bars and patch it with a concrete patch mix. Gravel lots with severe rutting or pumping should be leveled, compacted, and top dressed with a fresh layer of aggregate. All cracks in both asphalt and concrete pavements should be sealed. But if you're planning more long-term maintenance, it's important to know the difference between sealing a crack and filling a crack. If you're going to do an overlay or full depth reclamation in the future, any sealant that you use that has rubber would need to be pulled out. That will heat up at a different temperature and cause those cracks to reflect right back through your pavement. With concrete pavement, now's a good time to replace any panels that are beyond repair. And then some other just general maintenance items would include parking lot striping, replacing broken or worn out parking blocks, If you are like most districts and you have teachers or staff that try to park as close to the front door as possible, it's a good time to consider color coding your parking lot. Paint staff parking one color and visitor parking in a different color. If you're tired of trying to train parents and staff at the beginning of the school year, now's a good time to look at some wayfinding signage. And if you don't have parking lot lighting, or your parking lot lighting, you're using outdated fixtures, now's a good time to replace those with LED fixtures. Those will start saving the district money in just a short couple of years. Sidewalks and pedestrian ways. Sidewalks can easily be maintained with internal staff. If you have sidewalk panels that are beyond repair, get those replaced. Again, it's important to seal all your cracks and expansion joints now to prevent further damage. If you have panels that have settled or heaved more than 1/2 inch, those are considered an ADA violation, and those either need to be ground down to be flush or raised. If you have a bunch of panels, mud jacking is a pretty inexpensive alternative to replacement. While you're reviewing sidewalks, it's a good time to look at all of your accessible routes. If you have any curb ramps that aren't ADA compliant, just due to lack of detectable warnings, they do make retrofit panels for those. It's also a good time to check your ADA routes. Are they properly signed? Do you have any crosswalks? And if you do have crosswalks, are those is your paint reflective and is it in good shape? Are your wheelchair or are your accessible routes truly wheelchair accessible? Do they have any obstructions protruding out into the path, such as signage or landscaping, benches, trash cans, etc.? Do your cross slopes, are those all under 2%? Is the running slope under 5%? And then if it's over 5%, do you have handrails, and are your handrails ADA compliant? Are they continuous? Do they have returns at either end? Do they have the bottom rail, etc.? There's checklists out there. It's all easy stuff that can be checked by your maintenance staff. Moving on to underground utilities, it's good to identify anything that's privately owned. All of your water valves should be exercised annually, if not more frequently. If you own any private fire hydrants, those should be flushed on an annual basis. If your school has irrigation, now's a good time to check your backflow preventer, make sure that that's working properly. You should also inspect your sprinkler heads and make sure that those are staying off of pavement and buildings. For your storm sewer systems, you should visually inspect your grates and intakes on a pretty routine basis. Typically, you should do that anytime you mow or push snow or any other type of general maintenance in parking lots. Any areas that are prone to flooding should be checked more frequently. And probably at least annually, you should pull off all the lids on your manholes and then clean any debris. You'd be surprised at what we found in manholes, from basketballs to bikes. So those things restrict your flow. And if you've already got a flooding problem, those will definitely exacerbate that problem. So make sure that you take a look in there this summer. If you have other stormwater management facilities, detention basins, retention ponds, underground facilities, it's a good time for an annual inspection. Above ground detention basins, those should be maintained. You should remove any large brush and debris from outlets. They should be mowed routinely. They don't have to be manicured, but they do need to be maintained. If you have areas that are constantly wet and breeding mosquitoes, now's a good time to look at those and install a French drain or install some more water absorbent plants or just some general regrading to get those areas to drain. Basins should be cleared of silt on an annual basis or as needed. Retention ponds are designed to hold a specified volume of water. So anytime that you have foreign matter introduced into those, you're increasing your likelihood of flooding. Checklists for sanitary sewers would be very similar to storm. So I won't repeat everything, but if you have any backups, now's a good time to televise those lines. If you have grease traps or grease interceptors, get those cleaned out now. And then there isn't much internal staff can do on the electrical or gas side, but you should perform a visual inspection of anything that's above ground. Keep all the clear zones free of obstructions, equipment, leaves, snow, etc. And then obviously if you smell gas, make sure that you're contacting your utility provider. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda.
All right, thanks, Tim. So as it relates to vegetation, with the site being clear, now is the time to address any deficiencies in areas that just need time or attention so that they can get back to service better than before. So scout sites for any seasonal flooding, any frost heaving, and any shrubs and trees in need of trimming. So good rule of thumb is that shrubs should be pruned or trimmed back to a 3 to 4 foot high max height, and overstory shade trees should be limbed up so there is at least a 10-foot clear between the ground and the lowest tree branch. This will ensure that there's no hiding spots and that there are clear sight lines from the drop-off pickup areas and vice versa from the school offices out. If you're unsure of exactly what to look for or would like a second opinion, often the local police departments have site review services and can support this type of inspection. Now is also the chance to take a critical look at mowing practices and patterns. Are there any challenging areas to maneuver? Could time and effort be saved by slightly altering the shape of a planting bed or adding mulch around existing mature trees? And, do all of the areas on, the school campus need to be mowed? Or could they be converted into a native seeding instead? And perhaps, that area could support certain portions of a STEM curricula. And then in the landscape, look for your turf areas that consistently underperform. Do a soil test, dethatch, aerate, fertilize, and use this time to build a stronger base while you don't have any traffic on it. And then going back to trees again, for on-site trees, do major trimming now, but also make sure that you kind of understand what the appropriate trimming is for various species, because it will vary per species. This will allow you to clear out any hazardous growth and any poor structures. And also another thing is to work with municipalities to prioritize right-of-way tree removal if it's necessary, and this would allow you to stay ahead of the back-to-school schedule. For playgrounds, as you know, playgrounds serve a key function in the development of children, and we just want to make sure that the interaction and experience is, again, safe, it's accessible, and it's fun. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, this CPSC, sets the standard for equipment design, and it is critical to ensure that the equipment is inspected and maintained throughout its life. So having someone on your staff become a certified playground safety inspector is highly encouraged so that daily inspections can occur, which then allow you to instantly address any major hazards immediately. The National Recreation and Park Association offers this CPSI training and assistance locating certified inspectors in your area. So you just need to go to National Rec and Park Association's website for that information. With safety surfacing, the first thing to review and test is its impact attenuation. This is really to ensure that it has that shock absorption that it did on day one, and it'll help prevent injury. The instruments that they use for these tests are portable, and really what it'll do is tell you whether or not the surfacing still falls within that acceptable limit or if maintenance or replacement is required. If your play area is filled with the wood fiber material, now is the time to add material and fill in the low spots to ensure the appropriate depth is provided. And if you find that when you dig into the wood fiber and the material is wet or, worst case moldy at the bottom, there's likely an underground drainage issue. And installing drain tile, is one of the solutions to fix this. It is a messy job kind of after the fact when the surfacing is already installed. And it will require the container to be shut down for a time, but it will increase the longevity of the material and reduce maintenance in the long run. Another item we look at as it relates to playground is, would adding some type of perimeter fencing or some type of barrier make it easier for teachers and supervisors to keep track of the students? Would limiting the access points to 2 or 3 locations also help with supervision? So, again, assess those things, because now would be a great time to be adding in that infrastructure. And also, it's a good time to make sure too that there's clear sight lines from the building and seating areas across and through the playground. Also looking to make sure that there's that accessible route to and from the building to the container. Now is also a good time to provide shade. It's one of the most common requests we get for providing at playgrounds. So, while you wait for the trees to mature around that container, installing some type of tensile shade canopy is a great cost-effective alternative solution. For signage, ensuring the playground is signed with the age groups it is designed for is key too, to make sure that you don't have toddlers trying to climb the 12-year-old playground equipment, although they probably will, but it is imperative it is signed. And now is a good time to take a close look at the rules and policies and hours of use and update that information. And then lastly here, if there's a piece of equipment that is aging, or if there's an opportunity to expand the container, install that new independent play piece. It'll keep the playground interesting and exciting for students when they come back to school. All right, for the fields, again, impact testing is critical here to ensuring the fields provide that impact absorption necessary to minimize injuries or concussions. This is applicable to both field types, whether it's synthetic turf or grass. And the industry is trending to testing weekly during the sports seasons, and in some cases on game day. So testing is really the first step and will provide that baseline for what maintenance or major improvements are needed. Assuming the test results fall within that safe range, the next step would be to inspect the fibers of the synthetic turf to make sure they're holding up, measure the infill to ensure you have an even and adequate depth across the entire field. And if there are any issues that come up, working with the manufacturer for support, they're a great resource and they're always willing to help. And just know that there are some lead times for the products there too. So reaching out sooner than later is a good idea. And then for grass fields, just making sure that there's no irregularities or ankle twisters, and ensuring positive drainage will go a long way in the health of the field. It's also a great time to reseed overused areas, fertilizer, and potentially consider adding irrigation as well. And then the last slide I've got here is related to courts. Again, assessing for hazards and accessibility. Is the netting, fencing, hoops all in good working condition? Is there an accessible route to and from the courts from the the school building or the parking lot adjacent? And then per some of the pavement information Tim was going over, now's a great time to review that surface maintenance schedule. It'll vary depending on the coatings and the subsurface you have below. So it's a great time to take a close look at that. And then lastly, I just wanted to note that the American Sports Builder Association has great manuals for both fields and courts, including an 150-page document specific to tennis court maintenance and repair. So if anyone is interested in those resources, I'd be happy to provide after this session. Thank you.
So I'm going to transition it to Kevin Hildebrandt, talking about more on the building side of it, starting with the exterior and items that specifically relate to maintenance items.
So we'll start with a walk around of your buildings, exterior conditions. Take a checklist with you, actually make a checklist and then take it with you so you don't skip certain items. It's always good to know all your ages of all your components. What is the age of the roof? What age was the building built? What age did you do a window replacement? How old are they? And as you go around, identify all the damages. If you have a blueprint, it'd be great to mark them on the blueprint. So if you have to follow up with a contractor, they know where it's at. And that's creating that follow-up list. And as always, budget-wise, administration, business managers, you'll want to know the budget. Very seldom do I find that you have enough money to take care of all the issues. So with exterior conditions, we'll start from the top down. Roof conditions. Roofing is a major cost. I'm a strong proponent that you need to keep your buildings dry, and it starts with the roof. These pictures represent some ponding on your roof, a common problem that we see all the time. Ponding water right after rainstorms is not a problem, but if it lasts any longer than a day or so, you get what happens on the bottom left, and you start getting algae. Guess where you have your HVAC units? A lot of them are pulling in the air from the roof, so you start pulling in some musty air into your building. So common mistakes that are made at times are, why do we have roofing ponding? Improper installation, it could be. You could have some drains that are backed up. If you ever see water coming over a scupper, get up there and see what's going on. If it's too deep, you're not supposed to go up there, but everyone wants to rush to the drains to get them open. You could have some drains that are clogged. Bottom right shows the drain cover missing, which is a problem because maybe downstream that drain will plug with, it could be a baseball, softball, it could be anything. And then gutters. You have gutters on the building in certain areas just to direct the water to certain areas to get off. Once you get off the roof, you start coming down the sides, your walls. Check the condition of the mortar, the bricks, the siding. This picture here represents some step cracks. They could very much be a structural issue starting to happen. You see this, make note on the plan where it is. Make sure when you're on the inside reviewing the building, if it follows that you've got some major concerns. Water and buildings don't mix very well. Water is terrible for your building, so keep it out of the building. Signs of water intrusion, efflorescence on your building on the bottom two photos. You have water that's in your walls. The one on the right on top shows that it's been a condition that's happened sometime now because it's turned black. Where is the water coming from? Don't just go in there and fix these, get rid of the efflorescence and caulk it or tuck point or whatever. It's moisture telling you that it's coming in somewhere, and that source of the problem needs to be corrected first, and then you can fix the wall. Is it a caulking failure? Is it some damage to the wall? Is it anytime you have an opening, whether it's windows or doors, what have you? And then roof and flashings are often a common issue. Exterior walls, a little more on that. As you look at them, you see some issues here in the upper right. Just the mortar between the bricks is deteriorating and has over time. Aged quite a bit. It's not out to the surface anymore. Actually, when you rub your finger across that, it just turns to sugar sand. It's failing. It needs to be corrected. The one below it, just mortar's popped out. Sometimes frost will heave it out. Sometimes moisture behind it will start popping them out. And then caulking. Caulking doesn't last forever. After about 10 or 15 years, that's about the life expectancy of caulk. Buildings, brick moves, windows move, everything moves. That's why you have the caulk, so they can expand and contract. You see some holes here. They need to be repaired. Identify the solutions or the problems and then fix them. Here we have your lintels, very structural component to the building. The one on the upper right, I could stick my hand between the brick and the lintel. It is failing. Is it a brick failure that's holding it up? Is it rust? Is it rusted out? What is causing it? Like everything else in the bottom one, it's showing rust on the bottom. Paint is peeling. Like everything else, figure out what's causing it, fix that, and then fix this after you fix that. We'll move into the building. HVAC systems. Your buildings are a living body. You have to have a holistic approach. Oftentimes quick fixes are made. Is it the correct solution? Most of the time not. There's some implications of quick fixes. Oftentimes the implication is they get forgotten, and down the road other issues will pop up. Got some HVAC quick fixes. Bottom left, middle of winter, it was cold as heck. They couldn't get the univent to work, so take off the grill, put in a piece of plywood, and then it's there for years to come. So no fresh air going into the classroom at all. Bottom right, it's a coil that had a leak in it, so they cut it off, patched it. Who knows the last time they had heat or chilling going through those coils. Interior room, so they weren't too concerned. Upper right, they needed a vent for the kitchen, so they put it up there. Well, blocking half your vents for fresh air coming into that kitchen. Just some common mistakes we see where, I'll take care of my issue and the heck with everyone else's thing, and it can't be that way. Holistically on HVAC to make it work. HVAC systems, figure out when the last time it's been commissioned, or does it need recommissioning? Recommissioning or commissioning a system is very important. Everyone can put in all their equipment, but unless it runs correctly, it's not going to perform very well. Upper right, upper photograph is some older equipment. It's probably put in the 50s and 60s. So you're looking, that's 70, 60, 70 years old. Can it meet today's ASHRAE standards? I very much doubt it. With today's environment, with coronavirus, I've heard schools, we're changing our MERV rating. We're going to filters that have a much higher MERV rating. Is your equipment capable to handle that? I know years ago I came into a situation where they had sick building. So they're going to increase the airflows. Oh man, and they've changed out 30 horse motors, put in 60s and everything else. Well, they ran it to death and it just imploded on itself. And the nothing could handle it. So does your equipment, will it allow better filtration? Double check that before you start doing that. Mini splits, we see this a lot these days where mini splits start getting put in and everyone thinks they've solved the problem. We've brought air conditioning into the space, true, but I haven't seen a mini split yet that's bringing in fresh air. Some might, some hybrid of this, but it does cool down the room. Believe it or not, one of these was where the univent was boarded off, so absolutely no fresh air. They are getting air conditioning. They're great for head end rooms to keep your IT equipment cool, but for general classrooms, you're not getting your ASHRAE standard air rates into the rooms. Doors, another huge issue with buildings. They get a lot of use. Upper right, this time of year, after the frost is out, has that first set of concrete, your stoop there. This one has a trip hazard. Sometimes they're put on frost footings, which they should be, but sometimes they aren't. Oftentimes there's a trip hazard there. Painted yellow is a short fix, but it's not the right fix because you need to either tear it out or, like Tim said, mud jacket to get it up in place. Bottom right, some of these older buildings, upper right has aluminum doors, bottom right has a heavy steel door. After a while, the hinges wear out. You can simply replace hinges, screws loosen up, tighten them. Good maintenance thing is go around, tighten hinges, but this one's gone to the point where it's wrecked a lot of things in the helper hinge upper left. They wear out too. At some point, you're replacing the door frame and the door. Bottom left, the importance of walk-off mats, keeping the dirt at the entry, keeping it, walk off, get enough entrance. It's a beautiful entrance there with some newer doors. Keep the dirt in the right spot.
So transitioning to interior of the building, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you, and specifically on, starting off on the finishes, walls, floors, and such.
The summer for schools, this is typically our time when the guys shine. They shine floors, and they're proud and happy of all the things they can do with their flooring. But question for this year is, we've only had a little over half a year. How much floor maintenance is really needed? Do you spend some of that money refinishing floors instead of refinishing them, replacing some floors? Bottom left, these chairs with plastic rollers raise heck with carpet. You see the ripples in the carpet. You see the floor in the middle, those same rollers can create heck with those floors. And you start talking floor, and you also have hazardous materials around. That floor is 9x9 vinyl tile, so 99% chance it's asbestos containing in the mastic. And then as far as the rest of the building, we also worry about radon when we talk HVAC, and we also worry about lead and water and lead and paint when we start doing all these issues. Upper right, some carpet that's just hasn't been maintained properly over the years. It's a high wear area though, and the dirt is just matted. It's so bad. Bottom right, this school has replaced the carpet. They've replaced the lights into LEDs. The ceilings are in good shape. Everything, they've done a good job keeping it up. Interior finishes, walls, we all know how hard the kids and moisture. Upper left photo shows some moisture damage, whether it's HVAC, whether it's a roofing moisture issue coming in. Right one, is it just a failure in the wallpaper, or is it because it's under windows? Is it a moisture problem with the through wall flashing? Bottom left is just kids and carts and custodians, everyone, damaging walls. And then the right one, ceilings. You have a ceiling tile like that. Is it an HVAC issue? Is it a roofing issue? People are very sensitive. That our staff custodial staff get on this right away, maintenance staff replacing ceiling tile, because once they start talking the M word, mold, in your building, it's hard to get away from that. So tile replacement, timely tile replacement is very important. Next, your interior doors. Bottom right, we talked about damage. Doors and door frames take a lot of abuse. So do you replace, do you patch? That one there is a little hard to patch without it being so obvious on the bottom right. But these are also concerns. And then I'll turn it over to Kevin. We'll start talking about accessibility issues or concerns.
Yeah, so between maintenance and then transitioning to accessibility, identifying any hardware updates that are needed, now is a great time to do that. And also drinking fountains, if you have any fixtures that are outdated. The current requirement is for dual drinking fountains, because there's two heights, specific heights that are required. If you're replacing a drinking fountain, add a bottle filler on one of them as well. And just overall, from accessibility, we kind of break this into two categories. One is accessibility from a maintenance items, and then also we'll talk about a little later on improvements. Accessibility, it's important to have the right mindset with this. It's not a building code item. This is a civil rights requirement. And so having the mindset of accessibility barriers is a nonverbal way of saying no, either to staff, to students, to your community. So, to have that mindset of, any users that may have a physical disability, and this could be a limitation to them coming to events, using their school. This matters. So some of the smaller improvements that we see, a lot of facility staff taking on are grab bar heights, locations, soap dispenser heights, paper towel dispensers, room signage, and as we mentioned, door hardware. In the follow-up email, we'll send this presentation and then recording, but we did include in here a link to just a free public resource that you can go to that has coding accessibility requirements. And so you can, research, become educated on this, and it's a good resource to start with. One question that we see come up quite a bit is adult versus students' heights. And so it's based on the demographic that's using the restroom or fixtures primarily, and it's based on age. And so if the fixtures are primarily for people 12 years old or younger, then they would be classified as children's or student height fixtures. Mike, I'll turn it over to you to talk on the electrical side.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I'd like to just discuss a little bit on electrical maintenance items that you might not be thinking about. Exit and emergency lights, they're actually required to work for a minimum of 90 minutes when normal power source is lost. And they're actually supposed to be tested on a monthly basis for 30 seconds. Typically, there's a button on the side of each fixture, so you can just press and hold for 30 seconds. But on an annual basis, they're required to be tested for that full 90-minute duration per the life safety code. So during this extended time, it's a great opportunity to test them out. And just a few tips to create a checklist, maybe utilize some blueprints and log the fixtures when they've been repaired, replaced, or put in service. Ground faults, receptacles, they are actually supposed to be tested monthly as well. They say it right on the device. There are inexpensive testers like the picture up in the right-hand corner that you can purchase. Otherwise, you can just push the button right on the receptacle. If the trip does not reset, the device needs to be replaced. The batteries, the black battery there shown in the bottom, are found in all fire alarm and access control panels. And they're used for backup power. The battery's supposed to be also backed up for 90 minutes. And during this time, that's a great opportunity to test them out to make sure they last. Typically, they're good for 4 to 5 years. We recommend that you just write the date directly on the battery when you put it into service. I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Yeah, so we're going to transition a little bit to the improvement side. So this would be summer projects that you may have coming up that are already scheduled, or you may be considering taking advantage of this additional time for with students out of the buildings to do some larger improvements. And so with the unique school year that we're in, what we're seeing is there's pros and cons to that. Obviously, it's an advantage having more time. I think all facility staff could use more time, and contractors working on projects could use more time during the summer. It's always such a tight window. But there's also some potential barriers or challenges. So, one is, lower cost isn't always a good thing in a, competitive environment that we're seeing right now. Also, less experienced contractors pursuing K-12 work. So, really just, I don't want to say, maybe just something to be aware of is the construction activity that does seem to be slowing down with over the last month or so is on the commercial and more specifically retail side. So those contractors are just companies are continuing to look for work, and so they may look for other markets, education, higher ed, things like that, to for doing work. And so it's really important to just make sure the contractors and companies you're working with, they are qualified, they have the experience to do your type of project, and make sure you're doing it right. So really it starts with assess your facilities, be aware of what needs to be improved, whether it's accessibility or deferred maintenance or improvements. Prioritize as a group. Recap, sit down with finance and administration, put together a game plan for each of the facilities and work as a collaborative group. And then when it does come to, working with outside vendors and contractors, get references, talk to other districts that have worked with them, ask the companies and vendors for references, and, make sure that you're comfortable before, proceeding with work. And so, Tim, I'll turn it over to you, talk about some of the site improvements.
Yep, so we talked about just some general maintenance stuff earlier. This is taking it a step further and creating a pavement management plan. And some of you are thinking, why should I do this? Well, exterior site improvements account for 10 to 15% of a school district's physical assets. A relatively small facility, a K-6 facility with 30 parking spaces, requires about half an acre of pavement after you factor in sidewalks, drop-offs, parking, fire lanes, etc. And that has a replacement value between $300,000 to $500,000, so easily over $500,000. Just like your buildings and roofs, pavements wear out, and just similar to like Kevin talked about with creating a plan for your roof replacements, you should do the same thing with your pavement and try to budget those expenditures. The pavement management plan creates a schedule and a model for those. So some of you might be thinking this doesn't apply to us. We've only got aggregate parking lots, or we only have chip seal. Well, it does. Have you ever really considered the maintenance cost and upkeep for a gravel lot with all of the time and effort that your staff put into maintaining that, with fixing potholes, regrading? How many windows have you broken with your mower? How many mower blades have you had to replace because you keep hitting rocks? So all of those costs add up. So when you implement a PMP, what does that do? It really annualizes your cost. So if there's any business managers listening, they love that. That's music to their ears. Instead of letting your pavement degrade to the point where the only option is to replace it, there's things that you can do to manage it and extend the life of your pavements. And there's a number of things. We mentioned some of these earlier, but crack sealing, seal coats, mill and overlay, full depth reclamation, mud jacking, and the list goes on. Moving on to circulation and drop off. These seem to be a common concern for a lot of districts that we speak with. If you don't have adequate parking, as you know, parents tend to create their own, as do staff. these turn into safety concerns and maintenance concerns. They'll park in pedestrian ways. They'll park in your landscaping. They'll park in grassed areas. Those lead to additional maintenance costs. And it also just leads to frustration on both the parent side and staff side. So not every situation will lend itself to improve that with pavement or improving it, but implement a plan that works for your district. We've seen a number of districts that have limited space that implement a plan that works for them. If you're thinking about new school or improvements, a few things just to keep in mind. When possible, create one-way flows. Keep vehicular traffic separate from bus traffic. One thing that we like to do, especially at existing schools, is utilize our drone to get a 500-foot view of what's really happening during your pickup and drop-offs. You'd be surprised at some of the near misses that happen, both vehicular or pedestrian vehicle conflicts. So again, that's something to keep in mind if you're moving forward. What can you do to make those improvements? And again, what we try to do, we try to limit pedestrian and vehicular conflicts. Those are the number one priority. Secondary to that would be limiting vehicle to vehicle conflicts. And a few things to keep in mind when you do that are reducing curb cuts, reducing intersections, better signage. And then, you know, as civil engineers, we like to keep traffic moving, but especially in a parking lot and drop-off areas, we want that to be at a controlled pace. And a couple just good practice things are avoiding long and linear drive aisles, implementing traffic calming measures. So speed tables, narrowing drive aisles, putting some landscape planters in, anything that you can do to make the space feel more confined will help slow down traffic. Moving on to site security. So if you're considering adding a secure entry right now, make sure that you locate it so that the offices have clear visibility to the main walks into the main entries and parking lots. Amanda talked about this, but keep your landscaping, hardscaping, and all other obstacles clear to improve sight lines. One of the current trends right now with these is to provide a good amount of distance from the parking lot to the main entry, and that allows your staff or cameras to pick up people as they are coming into the building. It's also important to make sure that anything other than your secure entry is locked. And then another thing that's also a safety concern, and more recently, but creating physical barriers between public gathering areas, so plazas and your main entries. And you can do that in a number of ways with retaining walls, trees, changing grades, so stairs or retaining walls. So the number of things that you can do there. Other things to keep in mind, put painted hardware on your gates. That's just a safety thing. It allows people to exit playgrounds or wherever you have fenced in areas quickly if there is an emergency. And then provide security lighting in your parking lots. You don't have to flood the neighborhood with lights, but at least provide some minimal light levels. And the last thing I'll talk about is creating the asset management tool. It's kind of remarkable how many districts we go to that seem to be in the same situation, where they've got one guy that's their facilities manager. He's got 30 years of knowledge, but it's all intellectual knowledge. None of it's on paper. He knows everything about everything. He knows where every valve is. He knows where every shutoff valve is. So how do you transition when he's ready to retire? And that will happen. So you need to start thinking now about what steps to take to ensure that you have a smooth transition. One thing that we've been doing more commonly is creating an asset management tool. And you can do this a number of ways, but the one that we found to work the best is a GIS model. And really the sky's the limit on the amount of information that you can store and keep in here. It creates a living document. We've used it a number of different ways, but you can link videos. If you get your sewer lines televised, you can link those videos to a pipe. You can put your pavement management software in here. You can put your roof replacement schedule in here. Literally, if you can dream it, it can probably be done with GIS. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kevin.
Thanks, Tim. Other exterior considerations. Today's technologies are great on what they can do. Utilizing a drone. Utilizing a drone to do a roof asset management plan. They work great. I've seen some great drone footage on some roofing things. Use the drone for the building for tuck pointing concerns, window concerns. You get above a story, all these things are very hard to see. A drone, you have it tape recorded. You can see it over and over again. It works great. Thermal imaging is another great asset. You can use thermal imaging on your roof to see if you have wet insulation. You can use it on the side of the building to see where you have water in the walls. Is a great tool, great asset to have. And then these videos, when you do have all this information, it's great going into an admin meeting when you're in there fighting for money for your budget. I mean, these are things that you can use. And if it even come down to when the community, trust in the community that you show them these technologies, you show them the pictures you have to get support for facilities and getting that money that you need to manage your facilities.
And as I mentioned earlier, on the accessibility side, the improvements beyond maintenance items, some of those things are main entrance ramps, restroom configurations, and narrow door widths, increasing the width of those. And really the priorities that we often see districts go on are starting at the outside of the building, going from a parking lot, getting into the building, inside the building, be able to get through the main entrance, and then, having a accessible restroom, things like that. That's kind of the process and progression that you go through with accessibility improvements. And then, also looking at security improvements. Recommendation and, as part of our facility assessment approach, really any facility assessment we're working on, we recommend doing a camera coverage map. And really this can be as simple as your emergency egress map and just laying out color, just shading in where do you have cameras and what does that coverage look like? Where are you catching entrances, corridors, and is there any blind spots that you're aware of that, investing in a few extra cameras that it may really be advantageous. Mike, I'll turn over to you on the electrical side for improvements.
Yeah, you bet. So first, I guess I just want to stress the importance of, using qualified people to do this work. Let's leave it up to the qualified professionals. Many of the older facilities have electrical gear similar to what's shown in the picture. There are movable parts inside of those, and oftentimes the equipment gets installed, it's turned on and isn't touched for years. If these switches aren't exercised, they can become fused and not disconnect or reconnect. So when it comes to a construction project that you might have or need to do some service, and if you're not able to disconnect power, because the gear hasn't been inspected or serviced, it could result in some delays or replacement. Good things for electrical contractors to look at are visual inspections of the conductors. Clean the interior of the electrical gear, that includes the bussing. Exercise and lubricate the mechanisms so those switches do not get fused. And then torque the terminations. This will all extend the life of the equipment. Also it's a great time to go through some electrical safety training classes. Become more educated in the dangers of working in and around electrical equipment. Learn the proper PPE and other procedures like lockout, tagout. An arc flash study is also an excellent thing to get done. When we prepare arc flash risk assessments, we help facility managers maintain electrical safety standards. That's really intended to protect your workers and stay in compliance. This is in alignment with NFPA 70E and the standard for electrical safety in the workplace. It also is in compliance with OSHA's general duty clause, which requires all employers to implement employee training and safety programs. This doesn't require a qualified person to it does require a qualified person to open up electrical equipment and document conductors and fuses. But you can also do infrared scanning, and it's a great time to have the general maintenance performed. So Kevin, I'll turn it back to you.
So to summarize, now's the time, just in the uncertainty that we do have going on right now, now's the time that we really need leadership. And so that's continue to do that. You know, the goal with this webinar is to provide some resources and maybe to, you know, spur some ideas of things that you can do and you know, really start that roadmap. Know who you're working with, get references, be proactive, and, you know, just for each of your, you know, for your individual district and your buildings, determine, you know, how can you best use this time as an advantage. So with that, we'd like to turn it over to questions. And we did get a couple on Skype, or one or so, 2 questions on Skype. All right, let me see here. So first question is, are we able to get this presentation or at least the slides? Yes. So as a follow-up, after we're done here, we'll be sending out a follow-up email, and that'll have a live recording and then also the presentation itself. The second question is from Scott. Do you see any alterations to spacing or locations of interior finishes with the possible new normal we may have to abide by after we get through this initial phase of COVID-19? Bathrooms, classrooms, and such. Should we be looking at altering spaces to create more distancing? Scott, I think it's and I'll open it up to the group as well to think about. It's a really good question. One of the areas that we're always conscious of is restrooms. You know, when you think about when you use a restroom and then you wash your hands, being able to have doors that swing out is a great starting point. So if you are, you know, planning and doing projects, doors that swing out should really be, you know, the standard. And, you know, when you've got multi-fixture restrooms, think about where really should that door be positioned. So on the restroom side, you know, that's one. We're seeing more and more, especially in elementary schools, the trend is, you know, obviously having the wash fountains and such kind of in a central area outside the restroom. And, you know, that's advantageous, so the staff can keep an eye on students and such. They're washing hands, making sure they're washing hands. But I think from a space planning and layout side, I think there is going to be some changes of really looking at contamination as, you know, as you think about some of the spaces that, you know, like food service, and what are some of the spaces that's close to? What are the implications of, you know, those spaces that there is concerns about, you know, contamination, things like that, to be more aware of that. So I think that's one area that we could see changing and developing coming out of this. Kevin, any other specific thoughts?
Not right offhand, no.
I think, you know, Mike, any other particular thoughts on lighting or anything else you guys have been seeing?
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to need, you know, call it more square footage per pupil, or per student, whether, you know, just our general building footprints increase to allow more, you know, more space, and as far as flow and how we navigate kind of just the interaction going between classes and things. I think that's going to be interesting to see what some of the trends are.
Okay. Those are the 2 questions that we had so far. Any other questions? We'll give it a little bit here.
One thing I might add is, as we talk through things today, one is being an educated director or facility individual, knowing what's out there, and hopefully we helped answer some questions or create some thoughts today. Another one is you need to create a plan. a plan for everything. You heard our pavement management plan, landscape plans, playground plans, roofing plans, wall plans. You're probably sick and tired of hearing plans, but you know, if you fail to make these, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So it doesn't happen overnight. Some of these you might need help. You know, and don't be afraid. You know, we all feel in facilities that we can handle everything thrown at us, but at times it's just overwhelming. And some of it, there is a sense of urgency that you need to get ahead of it. Get some help in there to get some things figured out if you need that help. The longer it goes, the more damage is being done by water intrusion. So, yeah, it might take a little bit, but it's definitely worth your time to get these plans going. I've heard from several schools where, actually from some custodians that I know that, you know, oh, we got to slow down because we're going to run out of work this summer, and well, we're not getting summer help, and there is never a lack of work in facilities. And that's where we hope we can spur some things where you and your staff, you get your staff involved in helping you create these plans. Whether it's, you know, the list of emergency lights, where are they? Exit signs, getting those plans together that you can see them all and have it. How do you know where they're at? To get everything done that you're supposed to get done. It's when you have an emergency, to have that plan, it goes so much better than trying to do it on the fly. And no one looks good doing it on the fly.
And as I mentioned before, you know, this is a great opportunity that we see to use this to your advantage, to put that, you know, to take advantage of the time, put some, whether it's a plan or maintenance or improvements together. And, you know, coming out of this then, to be able to look back when students and staff come back to the building and say, you know, I didn't know that you guys are going to do that, or these type of things, or wow, look at this plan that you guys have put together. Again, that will reflect well on your district, and, you know, how you took advantage of this. So
no more questions have come in yet.
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, like I said, we'll be sending out the recording and then the presentation after this. And then if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us. Our contact information will be in that email as well. And yeah, we look forward to helping or assisting with any questions that may come from this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.